wife, and she was about to give birth. So they built a huge fire around this rock and rolled the rock into the fire, and the rock exploded, and out flew Wek Wek the prairie falcon, or Kaknu in the other stories. And Kaknu was who was responsible for creating human beings, and for also giving us the village sites and everything that human beings needed in order to survive. Kaknu sent Mouse to steal fire from the star women, brought it down, put it in the trees so that we would always have access to fire. So both Condor, Moloch, and Wek Wek were deities in their mythologies. We also know that golden eagles were very, very special and important. Only the village leaders, the captains, could actually own the feathers from the golden eagles. They would own the nesting sites of the golden eagles. So we know that they were very significant as well. So whether that is Wek Wek or Moloch or a golden eagle, we don't know. But the higher you get up in the site, the more of these bird figures we're going to find. So now I'm going to show you the artist's depiction of what's going on in this panel. So you see that there's the two red figures. There's actually a smaller red figure between the two of them that you guys can look for now, with some rubbed wings on the sides. So there's actually 3 of those red figures. And then there's 2 full birds right here and a very faint bird down to the right. And then there's another cross figure that looks almost like an airplane. And we can take a look at this and also pass it around. So why don't we start on this side? So we can pass that around. We can also pass this around so you can kind of see what that hematite looks like up close. And here's that one really good bird figure. So we'll just pass these around so you can see it much better.
Is there any thought to removing Gary from this tableau?
No, because he's right on top of the rock art. So right where the G of Gary is, to the left of it, through was,
right through the wing.
there's another, there's a wing there. So. No,
Gary?
Yeah.
I wish we could. If your name is Gary, you're not allowed on this tour. But that was there way back in the 1980s. So Gary must be an old guy by now.
Hey, Kat, are there a couple more over in there?
So we're going off to the left. Yes, there are. Let me see. Yes, there's definitely. These almost look like airplanes, you know, but they're more of those cross type figures. So the cave over here on the right, there's definitely many little crosses. So there's one big one that looks like an airplane, and then there's 2 smaller ones on either side and below that airplane-looking thing. And then you see some little charcoal squiggles on the very left side of that erosional feature.
Yes.
That one looks like a circle with maybe a body hanging down. We don't know if that's supposed to be an anthropomorph or what it is. But yeah, there's definitely more over there. And then there's more if you continue to the ones on that way, but it's much, much harder to see.
You have an idea of what?
So there might have been a lot more art here, but you can see how much has sloughed off from that original surface. All this is like newly exposed. So this might have been part of a much larger panel. One of the theories behind why these bird effigies look like they've been rubbed into crosses is that by about 1805, the Indians who lived on the land in Livermore, Pleasanton area, they were gone. They were all living at the missions or dead. Okay, there were a series of epidemics that came by before the Indians even made it to the missions. A lot of them died from these diseases. The ones who did make it to the missions, more than 80% of them died in the missions because of introduced diseases and poor sanitary conditions. There wasn't a whole lot of reproduction going on in the mission. So by the end of the mission era, which was really just one generation, the population was decimated by about 80%. I think when the measles went through, the epidemic went through in the early 1800s, there was about an 82% mortality with the kids at the mission with the measles. So not many of them made it, but after the mission period, this was still a significant place. And so we're wondering if the Christianized Indians came back, and those are actually now being rubbed as crosses instead of as symbols. So that's just a guess. A lot of this is just guesswork. Yes?
Another question, 2 questions. You know what is causing all the whitewash up
yes,
there?
that's some kind of a bird. I thought that was one of the owls, but I've never seen the individual in there, but I think Neil might have seen an owl in there.
Really been there a lot.
Yeah.
The other one, all those holes in the cliff, you know what process, all those little holes.
Okay, so that's the same thing as forming the larger caves.
Oh, okay.
And those little tiny depressions, I think, are called tophonia. Yeah, and you find a lot of that even when you go to the oceans. The cliffs by the oceans have a lot of tophonia. It's kind of like the beginning stages of forming the wind caves.
still higher and you see other birds, are they all rubbed out like that in the middle? It looks like there's something missing. I know you said they were rubbing crosses, but is that supposed to be the underside of the bird or the bird's back? Is there any way to
We're
tell?
not sure. Oh, and then going back to those red hematite figures, I was lucky enough to be out here. It was a humid morning. Sunlight was just right, and those figures aren't just these oblong figures. They actually have heads.
Oh, wow.
Really large heads, which is really interesting because you guys have heard about the ghost dance. And it was like a pan-North American Indian religion, yeah. But when they brought the ghost dance to Pleasanton, there was a rancheria on Phoebe Apperson Hurst's land near the Verona train station. They were called the Verona Band, the Alice L. Rancheria. Their ghost dance was slightly different because it harkened back to a much earlier religion. It was probably the religion for the entire East Bay area, which was called the Kuksu religion. Kuksu was, they had dances, and dances in Native California life, it wasn't just dancing for fun, it was dancing for religious purposes. If you didn't dance and didn't dance properly, wearing the proper regalia, then the world would not be right. You had to set the world right by performing these dances. And one of the dances was the big head dancers was part of the Kuksu religion. And so when we came out and I was looking at the hematite and I'm like writing my notes and I look up and I see this big head on both of those figures, that was just amazing. So we think that that harkens back to the Kuksu religion. Let me see, there's other stories. Oh, I was starting to talk about Byron Hot Springs. So the source of this hematite, this orange substance, is the Byron Hot Springs. There was another story about Kaknu, which is Wek-Wek, the prairie falcon. Kaknu challenged the owner of the body of salt to a duel, and Kaknu was killed. And where he died was the body of salt that he wanted all people to share. And where he died and was buried there, it became red. And the red is the hematite that people used. And so the Byron Hot Springs is where the origin of death was. Because back in the days, in a lot of these stories, you know, they're trying to decide, these deities are trying to decide as they're creating people, well, should they die and be gone forever, or should they come back after a few days? And of course, Coyote says, oh, well, you know, if they come back, there'll be too many people and there won't be enough food, so they should die and go across and never come back. And so, of course, it was Kaknu who died and then couldn't be resurrected because they had already made the decision that the dead would forever be dead. So in his mourning, Coyote came to this place, the place of the stone houses, which was Vasco Caves. And in his mourning, he passed through a rock from the east to the west. And there is one really eerie place that I'm going to show you later on today, where you're looking at solid rock, and if you stand in just the right place, suddenly you're looking through the rock and you can see the sky on the other side. And so there's the origin of death was at Byron Hot Springs, and the origin of life might have been that rock we think where it exploded and Wek-Wek flew out of, we think is on the backside of Brushy Peak on the Livermore Area Recreation Park District side. It's a rock that they call Rattlesnake Rock, but it's the rock that Bev Ortiz surmises was the place of creation. That's why it's such an important site. I mean, that's where life and death both came from, where the person, the deity who created people and everything we needed came from was right here. And that's why normal people would never have come up here. It was just for the religious folks. And that's why I always feel really special that we're able to come up here now, because, you know, in the old days I would have been back at the party place pounding acorn. And what you're standing on right now, if you look down at the soil, it's a little bit different from the soil that we were walking on as we came up. It's darker. And when we get up to the top of these shrimp tanks, it's going to be dark there too. These darker soils are what we call midden soils. It has a lot of carbon, a lot of stuff in it that shows you that this was a place of habitation, or at least of use, over an extended period of time. So we're standing on midden soil. That's why we're not allowed to dig here. We were thinking at first of creating a walkway so we wouldn't be right on the soil. So, is everybody okay with kind of scrambling up that way?